Psalm 11. In the Lord I take refuge. How then can you say to me, I'll start again. Psalm 11. In the Lord I take refuge. How then can you say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain? For look, the wicked have bent their bows. They set their arrows against the strings, to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. He observes everyone on earth. His eyes examine them. The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked, those who love violence, he hates with passion. On the wicked he will fall rain, fiery coals, and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. For the Lord is righteous. He loves justice, and the upright will see his face. Amen.
Good. It's great to be back with you all, Bo Baptist. Perhaps I should say a little bit about myself as usual. So when I came before, I was joint pastor at Lighthouse Baptist Church, and I'm not there anymore. So Lighthouse Baptist, I think last year, was at an early stage of merging with Tower Hamlets Community Church, a larger church that used to meet down the road, but their main base is now the Husk, London City Mission Centre in Limehouse. But Lighthouse has become the Bow congregation of THCC. So most Sundays they have two services, one in Limehouse, one in Bow. End of the month, typically they join together at one place or the other. So things are going well. It seemed to Eric and myself and others that this is the way God was leading us. And Lighthouse, having been dwindling and aging, is now thoroughly revitalised with lots of young people and families, and we thank God for that. But it came a point for myself and my wife where it was mutually agreed that we would step out so that the new leadership at THCC can do things and carry out the vision without people sort of appealing to me for old stuff or whatever. It's just easier sometimes for old leadership to step out, and that's what we decided to do. So we are attending another church in Tower Hamlets, but it's early days and we've not gone public about that yet. Anyway, so welcome your prayers for myself and my wife. It's not been particularly easy, but we're finding the grace of God as we go. Well, here we are then. So to talk about Psalm 11, which I find truly a psalm for our times. Because don't we get tempted, like David was tempted, to think, oh, it's dangerous out there, to just hide away. So I've titled this, Don't Hide Away. These thoughts of hiding away, where's the reading? There we go. In the Lord I take refuge. I think it's so dangerous. These thoughts come from our own thoughts, from inside, just wanting to be defensive, wanting to be risk averse. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to put myself through any trouble. No, I'll just stay. I'll just keep quiet, hide away. Sometimes it's spoken by others. People say, no, you can't go out there telling other people what you think. You have to zip it. It's best just to keep quiet. People will say this to us. Well, let's think about what was happening with David. This is a psalm of David. Sometimes that might mean it was written by somebody else in the style or thinking of David, but here it's pretty evident that this is a genuine psalm written by David himself. David, of course, was the king of Israel, the second king after Saul, and David had led Israel in great victory over the Philistines and their other enemies. But later on, there were still troubles for him. He was challenged by one of his many sons, Absalom. He didn't sort of want to wait. He wanted to make sure that he was going to be the one to inherit the kingdom, and so he grabbed it. But this is probably before that rebellion fully happened. You're reading between the lines about what makes sense about where this comes. Maybe this was while that rebellion was brewing. So David gets this demoralizing advice. whether it comes from a supporter saying, take care of yourself, you are the Lord's anointed king, you must defend yourself, keep yourself safe at all costs, or maybe it's from a plotter trying to undermine his confidence. Well, either way, they're pointing out there are assassins. There are people who set the arrows against the strings. It says from the dark. Maybe it means from the shadows. When you step around past those dark alleyways where the bright sun, you can't see who's hiding in there for a moment. Or maybe it's about night time. But there are people ready to shoot you. So they say, run for the hills. Go, flee. Get out of Jerusalem, out of the danger of the big city. Go back to the hill country. Don't you remember, David, when you were on the run from Saul, how you used to hide in those hills? You know those hills like the back of your hand. You have proven in terms of hill warfare that you are safe in the mountain territory. But verse 3, it says, what can the righteous do? What can you do? Trouble is brewing. An implication probably is nothing. There's nothing you could actually do. If you try and counter the stuff that's brewing, that would just be useless counter effect. You might as well just get out of here. Or maybe what can the righteous do means there's just only one thing you can do, which is to keep yourself safe. Get away from danger. And the implication of all this demoralizing advice is, look, all that God stuff, it doesn't really count, does it? It doesn't really make any difference. Where is God? Is God going to defend you? Who's kidding themselves? Keep safe. Look after yourself, number one. That's the advice. We might feel like that too, especially this verse about when the foundations are being destroyed. Many people look around at what's happening in society and feel, well, that is what's happening. I mean, at the moment, there's Pride going on. There's a big celebration. It's down in Brighton at the moment, isn't it? And we're all supposed to celebrate things that, when I was young, were either criminal or were in the textbooks defined as forms of mental illness. And now we're supposed to celebrate. And it is, at the very least, confusing, isn't it? We feel the foundations of our life. We used to know what is a man, what is a woman. And someone was saying to the Church of England bishops a couple of weeks ago, has the Church of England got an official definition of a woman? And a bishop said, we didn't need one. It used to be considered self-evident. What is a woman? And as for telling the truth, or telling the lies, just telling lies has become so normal, hasn't it? It used to be a matter of shame to be caught out telling a fib. That a government minister proved to be lying would have to resign. When I was a kid, that's how it was. And now they just bluster through it and hope the news has moved on to something else tomorrow. And as for telling the truth, if we're going to speak the good old truths, what we consider, well, then we're liable to be attacked ourselves, just for telling the truth. People get sacked or disciplined at work. You might have seen a petition come around. If you do see it, I suggest you sign it, for someone called Maureen Martin. She was standing for Mayor of Lewisham for the Christian People's Alliance. And just defending the fact that marriage between a man and a woman ought to be the strongest building block in society. She wasn't going on the attack or being insulting or fearful or hateful to anyone. But some people complained to her employer, which is the Housing Association, and they sacked her. Gross misconduct, they said. To be speaking political views when by a bit of effort someone could work out that you work for us. You've got to go. I mean, I expect what will happen is that she'll appeal and she'll get reinstated or compensated, but it'll take a couple of years of mega stress. That's normally what happens. But it's hard out there, isn't it? And if we want to go and do street preaching, I mean, who wants to go street preaching? That's hard, isn't it? People say, no, just stay out of trouble. And even stick your head up on social media. You all know what kind of pile-ons can happen online. Let's not get started. So what can the righteous do? Just hide away. Flee like a bird to your mountain. It's best to keep quiet. There's that sort of bunker mentality. What have I done with the zapper? I can't see what I've done with it now. I use this one. Right. There's a bunker. A few years ago, I stayed with a friend in Colorado City, and not far from Colorado is Cheyenne Mountain. And there's this big tunnel going into Cheyenne Mountain where I can't go. You need very special permission to go in there. But come the 2001 September attacks, Dick Cheney, the vice president, he was hidden away in there. This is probably the most secure and safe nuclear bunker in the world. This tunnel goes down for 600 meters into the mountain. They've got blast doors that weigh about 25 tons, and they're designed so that you'll always be able to get out, even if things break. It's the safest place in the world, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. So go to your mountain. Secure yourself. Do your risk assessment. Say, oh, it's a bit tricky. Let's withdraw. Let's get to Cheyenne Mountain. Wait it out. But David hears all this temptation to hide away, and he turns it into a rebuke. He said, how then can you say to me, I don't need that. I don't need no Cheyenne Mountain. I don't need to dig myself in the hills. In the Lord I take refuge. In Yahweh, our covenant God, I have taken refuge in him. Why do I need to worry about earthly countermeasures? I've taken refuge in God. I'm not going to hide away. Now see that David is not in denial here. He's not saying that there aren't any dangers. He's admitting, verse 2, he acknowledges, yeah, there are people with their bowstrings, could be here in the city, but I'm not leaving the city until God says it's time for me to leave. Some people's idea of risk management is you see what could possibly go wrong, and then you do whatever's needed to completely eliminate or avoid the risk. That's not risk management. Risk management is saying, well, let's just acknowledge what the dangers are, take countermeasures where it makes sense, but then just go with the residual risk, because that's more important to do what we're here to do. Have we got a quote here? Yes, George Whitefield, 17th century, wasn't it? George Whitefield, preacher and evangelist. He got so abused. I better not say some of the revolting things people used to do to him, but he was, at the very least, threatened and beaten up. But he carried on preaching. Nothing would stop him preaching here and in America. He would carry on, and he said, we are immortal until our work on earth is done. No one can actually kill us until we've done what God has put us here to do. We're immortal. What he means is God will keep us alive until we've done what God has appointed us to complete. Until that day. Until then, even being hurt, even being abused or beaten up, that's only possible by God's permission and for his purposes, which may be to humble and refine us as preachers or speakers. It may be that it brings us into contact with people in prison. If we get thrown in prison with other people, we may have a mission field, a chance to speak to people. Otherwise, it would have been accessible to us. So, look at the risks, but don't only look around. Don't only say who might be on the attack, but look up. Look up. The Lord is in his holy temple. Yahweh, in his palace or temple is the same word in Hebrew. And this is not talking about the Jerusalem temple, because in David's lifetime that wasn't built. The Ark of the Covenant was still within a tabernacle, a tent at that stage. It was his son that was going to build Jerusalem temple. The idea that the Lord is in his holy temple. He's got his palace way out of reach. He's unassailable. Never mind that digging a tunnel in Cheyenne Mountain. God's holy temple is on high. His heavenly throne, no one can touch him. So I've taken refuge in God. What could be safer than to be taking refuge in the Lord? He is on high. He is all-powerful. I am safe in him. And we get this word about God examining. The Lord examines. The idea God is staring down. God is watching very closely, and he misses nothing. He misses no one. So being in heaven, not only God can't be attacked, but he has that vantage point to see all that's going on right in the hearts. And in our modern translation, it kind of glosses over that his eyes observe everyone on earth, his eyelids examine them. That's the literal Hebrew. Maybe that's just poetic variation from one line to another. But maybe, what do you do with your eyelids? You can narrow your eyelids when you're looking really intently to make sure you miss nothing. Derek Kidner in his Tyndale commentary says, if God appears to be still, God's stillness is not inertia, but concentration. God is examining the lives of people on earth. Not that God is fixated on finding fault. Some people can have this kind of mentality, or might get tempted or deceived by the devil to think that that's what God's doing, always trying to catch me out, trip me up. No, God sees some as righteous. The Lord examines the righteous. The fact that God is watching us is a chance to prove who we really are by what we do. Yeah. But some he sees and he hates. Some God does not consider righteous but wicked. Those who love violence. We have some foolish ideas about violence, don't we? I mean, I like to watch some of the Marvel cinematic stuff. Okay, hands up. Maybe that's silly or a bad thing, bad example for you. I'm watching some of the old stuff. What's it called? Daredevil, who's some sort of Christian character in Marvel, actually. There's a scene where Daredevil, this character, is face to face with this Japanese ninja, and he's a very experienced, very dangerous warrior type. And this ninja fellow says, "You are a worthy opponent. It will be my honor to kill you." And we like this fantasy that violence is honorable. But folks, it is fantasy. Keyword fantasy, okay. Violence generally is not like that. Violence generally is cowardly. Someone who resorts or manipulates to use violence generally wants to get home safe. Doesn't want to have an evenly matched balance. He will attack when it's unexpected. It will be armed against unarmed, 4 against 1, taking every kind of advantage. And the Lord hates with a passion those who love violence. Those who exploit other people. People like human traffickers. Those who will overload a boat for the sake of profit. Yes, I know it's only built for 12. Let's put 16. Let's put 20 in this. It'll probably go 20 miles across the English Channel or the Mediterranean Sea. And so many people are drowning at sea at the hands of human traffickers, or packed into a lorry. When is it just part of the equation? Yeah, we can afford to lose a few on the journey. God hates that. A couple of weeks ago I saw something on Al Jazeera, a TV report about, again, there's a place in the third world where there are big scam centres. And it's not just that people are choosing to become a scammer to make easy money. People are being forced, they're being conned. They turn up for what seems to be a legitimate job interview, and they're imprisoned and they're locked inside this big compound for a year or more, having to do telephone scamming. And some people occasionally managed to get out, but the police and the politicians would do nothing because they're all in the pay of these scam masters. God hates people who do such organised crime like that. And not only the long-distance telephone scamming that can ruin lives from far away, but the face-to-face violence as well, the abusers and sexual predators. God hates anything like that. We know that such people even exploit an atmosphere, a trusting place like a church. So that's why we need to have safeguarding rules and follow things scrupulously to make sure we're not leaving people alone in a situation where they could do such a thing. And if there's anyone here who has been through a terrible experience like that, you might think, where was God? Why was God looking away when that happened to me? But dear friends, this psalm assures us God was not looking away. God may have allowed that to happen for some purpose that is beyond our comprehension, but God saw. And he will see to it. As Jesus said, God will see to it that his little ones get justice. God hates. God hates with a passion. This is a good translation. It's literally, his soul hates. But the impact of that, it comes across well in these words. God hates with a passion. Some people might be having difficulty with that. Say, Neville, how can you say that God... I can't say that God hates. Our God is a God of love. How can a loving God be one who hates? Well, our difficulty with the idea of God hating anyone or anything is, our idea of hate is from a human experience of hate, when it's something that impulsive and it takes over. But God's hatred never controls him. Indeed, God's hatred is controlled by his love and by his justice. God's hatred is an instrument of his will to ensure that he will take justice. And isn't it better that God should hate wickedness and violence than that God should be indifferent to it? It's rather a relief to find that God is watching, and God does hate what is appalling on earth. And these expressions, like this psalm and others, where we get these expressions of God's outrage against evils done on earth, these signal to us that God does care deeply for us, little mortal beings. He cares deeply for our good, and he will see to it. As it says elsewhere, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. And the more intense the hatred on certain people or certain actions, then the more fearful the judgment that is coming. We said earlier, some people say to Christians who think God protects us, who's kidding themselves? But now, who's kidding themselves? Those who abuse other people and think they will get away with it, they are the ones who are kidding themselves. Sudden judgment will come. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. And what does that sound like elsewhere in the Bible? Sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah. Those cities are carrying on thinking God didn't see, God wouldn't stop them, and then sudden judgment came on them. There will be sudden judgment at the end of time. A scorching wind will be their lot. In the Middle East they have a wind called the simoom, which literally means a poison wind. It's a deadly wind. It is so hot, like maybe 120 degrees Fahrenheit or something. This burning wind comes out of the desert, and if you're exposed to it, there's more heat being pumped into the human body than you can possibly lose through sweating and evaporation. So it's deadly. Some people are afflicted by heat stroke when this wind comes, even though it doesn't last very long. It's quite short, just 15-20 minutes. Brief but deadly. So will be the vengeance of God. Another thing to say about these passages that speak about God hating and visiting intense punishment on people is that the most intense things said about God punishing people are specific about those who most specifically deserve them. When people suffer under the hand of God, no one will be saying, that was unjust. Everyone will know God only did what was thoroughly deserved. There's only one class of people who get something different to what they deserved, and that's those who receive mercy. That'll be us. Because we read, this is not the end of the psalm, but the end of the psalm is this: the Lord is righteous, he loves justice, or he loves righteousness. The upright will see his face. He is righteous and he loves righteous deeds, or he loves justice. That means, well, God does love doing justice, but he also loves seeing righteousness. He loves to catch us doing something right. Remember, we read about the Lord examines everyone on earth. The Lord examines the righteous. When I was a young manager, I was given a rather slim paperback called The 1 Minute Manager. It's a bit shallow, but it's not a bad starting point for being a supervisor or a manager. And one thing it said is, watch your staff and try to catch them doing something right, so that you give them a 1 minute praising. That's to encourage your staff. Well, God is a God who loves to catch people doing what is right. And look at this reward. The upright will see his face. Well, that's only a reward for those who love God. Some people might say, meh. But those whose lives now are lived in fear and love and trust towards God, what a rich reward it would be to see his face. To see the Lord Jesus Christ reigning, to see him in the flesh, in our clothes with our own new bodies, with new eyes, to see the face of God in Christ. It's a reward only for those who take refuge in the Lord, which is where we started. In the Lord I take refuge. Yes, the Lord loves justice. The upright will see his face. The Lord examines the righteous. He finds some righteous. He examines and he considers some righteous. Now in the New Testament this is called justification, that the Lord declares some people righteous. And the New Testament, it only puts this stuff together at the cross. It was a bit of a mystery all through the Old Testament just how these things hold together. How is it that God is one who is forgiving and yet who punishes to the third and fourth generation? How do those hold together? It only makes sense once we see the mystery revealed on the cross. Colossians, the end of chapter 1, says this: the mystery has been kept hidden for ages and generations, but is now disclosed to the Lord's people. And when Paul talks about a mystery, he's talking about something that used to be locked up, but now it's open for Jews and Gentiles alike to hear it. And he says, to them God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles, that's among all peoples of the earth, the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. So that's there in the seed, back in Psalm 11. The upright will see his face. So the foundations are being shaken. There are dangers out there, but don't hide away. Let us be like David, say, how can you say to me, hide away? I've taken refuge in the Lord. So let us go out in the city and do the works of God. Take refuge only in the Lord, and may his eyes see us doing what he loves. Praise be to the Lord. I'll be happy to take questions on that later on after the service. I'll hand over now to Andy, who's going to lead us in communion.